And I always say to the prosecutors as a joke, they're like, "What's your counter offer?" And I say, "Dismissal and an apology will be acceptable to us."
It's funny. Honestly, I say dismissal and a lollipop, but same. I may be willing to negotiate the lollipop.
There you go. There you go. And I sort of say, okay, the apology isn't necessary. We can move on with just the dismissal.
This podcast is not a source of legal advice. No two legal cases are the same. Contact an attorney if you require legal assistance.
Today's guest is someone who brings both gravitas and generosity to the legal profession. Robert Bianchi, a certified criminal trial attorney, former Morris County prosecutor, and now partner at Bianchi Law Group. Bob has built a reputation as a fierce advocate, respected legal analysis, and thoughtful mentor. Whether you're a young lawyer trying to find your voice in the courtroom or a seasoned professional facing burnout, Robert's insights are sure to inspire and challenge you. Let's jump right into the conversation. Welcome, Bob.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. Finally, I'm going to be on the mighty Merp podcast. I've been waiting for this for a long time.
And maybe afterwards I'll send you some Merp so that you can
I
be
love it.
wearing
I love
some
it.
pink.
Absolutely. Well, I got as close as I could. I tried to wear something, but it's good for a guy.
Yeah, I totally understand. Also, is it 100 degrees where you are?
It's brutal. I just did a video actually. I had like a hat on. My wife says, "Don't ever be near me when you're wearing that hat because you look like you're 100 years old." But it's about hydration and SPF, baby. There you go.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. I'd like to know a little bit about your origin story before we jump into the legal career, where you grew up, what was your upbringing like? Tell me something about what started you down this legal profession, but before the origin.
Wow. Well, it starts obviously with my mom and dad, and both of them had very, very impactful, mannerisms that have affected my career in kind of a bifurcated way, if you will. My dad's 92 years old. He's still alive, and he is an attorney and was known as a killer trial lawyer. He was a prosecutor, assistant prosecutor. He was the first head of homicide at the Essex County Prosecutor's Office. He eventually was appointed by the governor, Governor Byrne, to be the banking commissioner for the state of New Jersey. So growing up, my dad was like bigger than life to me. And my father, it's clear. I tell people that if you look back at my life, I didn't have an option about being anything other than an attorney.
I know other attorneys who say my kids don't even know that law school is optional. They just think you go to college and you go to law school.
I was so inspired by him, and my dad never treated me like a child. He spoke to me like an adult. My wife even laughs at this. Like, I really wasn't reading like kids' books and stuff. I mean, I learned to read, but my father had me reading trial transcripts, murder transcripts at like 7 and 8 years old. So I was fascinated. He talked to me in a big way. And what I really loved about it was that it was brainwashing, but it was true. He said, someday you're going to be an attorney and you're going to always have the ability every day of your life to make a difference, to make somebody breathe easier, to right a wrong. And you'll never understand until you get older, and probably until you're later in life, the power of the ability to be able to service other people. So that's part one. And then, Melissa, I have a very, very significant story on my 5th birthday on March 15th. That would be 1968. I'm not afraid to say it. That was my 5th birthday. And my dad asked me what it was that I wanted to do for my birthday. And I asked him if he could bring the quote unquote police car, which was really the prosecutor's car. It had the siren and the bells and the whistles. And it actually had a phone. You could pick up the phone and that's how somehow, I guess, through like a walkie-talkies kind of thing, you could communicate to other people and call the people. And I wanted to have a Mountain Dew. So those were the desires of a young boy, a Mountain Dew and the drive in the police car. And I can remember this like it was yesterday. He drove the car, he put the sirens on and the lights, and then he let me call my mother on the phone. And then I hung up the phone, and I'll never forget this. I said, "Dad, when I get older, what can I do to get a car like this?" True story. He said to me, "Kid, let me tell you something. When you're my age, you're not going to have to borrow the car from the prosecutor. You will be the prosecutor."
Wow.
I can say that in certain aspects of my life, the living up to this kind of very lofty thing, and much of which is in the hands and control of other people.
Right.
I realized, I think, when I was the county prosecutor, when I finally got nominated, it was a lot of hard knocks. It was like, it kind of bothered me sometimes. I'm not going to lie to you, when people would tell me that the job just got handed to them and that they were like in the right place at the right time, or that they just decided, they woke up one day and wanted to be a prosecutor. And I worked so hard to make myself valuable, and it just was not happening.
Right. And so I'm going to I know we're talking about your origin story, but I'm going to jump to being appointed as a prosecutor, because I don't think people understand. I would say it's a pretty comparable process as being appointed as a judge. And it doesn't matter if you were at a prosecutor's office and you were the hardest working prosecutor at that office. Takes more than that. It takes a little bit of political connection. It takes a little bit of being at the right place at the right time. And you need Senate approval. You need, it's not just as easy as being the best person for the job. It's not always meritorious, is what I would say.
Well,
you might be able to explain it better or more detailed than that, but there are a lot of other factors that you can't control when you're being appointed to a job like that.
Absolutely. It's a big process, right? And like, I was disabused of the idea that I was special because I went through the meat grinder of how to get there. And I realized that there were people that like, when I was county prosecutor, 21 counties, only 4 of us ever walked into a criminal courtroom before we were appointed to county prosecutor. Only 4 out of 21. And what that tells you is how political a process it really is. And I would say to my dad, I would be like, was it always this political? And he said, no, the governors in the past used to try to pick the most qualified people to be judges and prosecutors. And now it's become much more political than it is talent-wise or worthy-wise. I'm sorry to say it. It's just a fact. And so but my dad was like, work hard and, of course, be in the political world. So my strength was the law side of it. I was an assistant prosecutor for 7 years. Then I purposefully left it when that wasn't fashionable to be a defense lawyer so I could have experience on the other side. I became a civil rights litigator suing police departments. I try to make myself as imbued in the process as possible and as attractive. But you mentioned something that is like something that even I, who was going through it and had a mentor like my dad, and we were doing the politics of it, is that even eventually, if you get a governor willing to appoint you, that's only part of the game. That's when you really get dumped into the meat grinder, because now you need Senate confirmation. And there's this game playing that goes on. For me, for example, the governor indicated that he was going to appoint me after 16 trips to Trenton, multiple interviews, a file that was like that large, them vetting every aspect of it. And so you feel like, wow, the governor's going to appoint me. You get the call. It's awesome. And then you hear the senators blocking you. And what that means is that each county has state senators. And each state senator can exercise this thing they called senatorial courtesy, where they can, for absolutely no reason,
Right.
just block the nomination of the governor. And that's what happened to me. And so yet another battle happens. Can you imagine, for a guy like me, since being 5 years old on March 15th, 1968, wanting to be the prosecutor, getting that close and having one singular person say, nope, sorry, your dream's done.
Right. And then it can change. For other deals are made, and it might not be about you anyway. The senator objecting might not even be about you. It could be about some other appointment that they didn't get. And that's the lack of control. I've talked to a lot of people that are judges now, and everyone, and I say it's a very comparable process, and everyone's story is different. Some people, it's, the easiest process, and other people, they know they're going to be appointed, and then it's held up for a year to a year and a half, and it's the same. So it is, I'm going to say, for someone who probably is goal oriented and so close to achieving the goal and then not having control of that final say, must have been frustrating.
It's heartbreaking. I'm going to tell you, it's a heart-wrenching thing, both my getting in and getting out. Eventually, my senator relented Because to your point, it was nothing about me. And I have to say, to the senator's point, he was very clear about the reasons why. And it was about a judge that he wanted appointed that the governor. So they went through their horse trading. But for the 3 or 4 months that's going on, and your people aren't coming to you as a lawyer any longer because they think you're leaving. And
I was going to say, that's the hardest part when you're in private practice. It's one thing when if you were working at the prosecutor's office already, or if you were even at the public defender's office, but when you're waiting for that appointment and you think it's occurring and you're in private practice, how do you take new cases? How do you stop working when you're not sure if you're going to be there? And how do you continue working when you're not sure you're going to be there? So you were in a no man's land for a little bit, right?
Yeah, and I was thinking back before I did your podcast today that I know people say this is a punchline, but it's really true when you think back. I have been so blessed, and I use that word very specifically and in a very faith-based way because that's how I am, that the right people were always around me. The people who cared about me, who loved me, who believed in me. And so during that period of time, I was working with my dad at the time, which was a great experience for 12 years working with my father. But he was able to help me despite the fact that he took it on the chin when I couldn't take any more cases on, or when I left and I had to leave him a whole boatload of 30 or 40 significant files, or even when I left the prosecutors eventually, having my dad's office to go to have a place and a phone, and my law partner, Dave Bruno, who you know. And I've always been around people who are honorable, who are hardworking, who believed in core missions, who believed in doing the right thing. And so those people help you through. At the time, you're going through a storm, and you don't realize it. My wife, I mean, my God, she's an innocent. My wife's not a lawyer. She's gentle. She's the exact opposite of her husband. But she went through it because she would have to listen to it, and she was watching me put through that meat grinder. So I was watching her watch me go through it, and I could tell how sad she was. It hurts everyone. And here's the sick thing. The people that are making that happen could care less.
They also don't really understand the practice of law, and specifically the practice of criminal law for the most part. So let me ask you, what was it like finally stepping into the role of the county prosecutors, and how did that leadership position shape your view of the criminal justice system?
Wow.
Why don't we go with the first one, stepping into the role and the leadership position? Did you have a philosophy when you stepped into that role?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my criminal defense experience was key in making me what I like to think is a very good, and people would say excellent prosecutor for the county. I knew the other side. And by knowing the other side, it not only gave me a tactical advantage as opposed to a career prosecutor who's never represented a client. It gave me, like, I can give you many examples, to know what they're going through, but moreover, it formulated in my mind, and I wish all prosecutors had an opportunity to sit, and we have this adversarial system, I say all the time, and we remain silent, and there can be this standoff, if you will. But if they ever sat and saw the collateral consequences, as I like to call them, that 95% of our clients are going through, the mental health problems, the addiction issues, the sadness associated with it. Their jobs they're losing their jobs, they're losing their family, they're losing their reputation.
Their homes.
They're losing their homes, they're losing their finance. It's very difficult. You do this. You're a phenomenal certified criminal defense lawyer yourself. And we've talked when we were on a wellness panel, which I love too. I'm sure we'll get into. But I got into that space because I watched at how hard it was to deconstruct people's lives with deconstructing. So one of the first things that happened to me when I was prosecutor, because don't forget, I was an assistant prosecutor for years before that, was a lot of people came up to me in the beginning of my term and they wanted to be tough, right? So this is the first thing you asked me I wanted to do. The first thing, I knew where I was going to go, but I just wanted it needed to happen. And they would call people things like scumbag or scale or piece of this or some negative derogatory term. And within the first week, I brought them all together, all the lawyers, and I said, listen, anything that's been said to me in the last week, or I think it's 2 weeks maybe, it's all tabula rasa. It's clean. It's clear. Okay, nobody has to worry about it. But let me just suggest something to you. If a job is an instinct you possess, then the first thing that I'm going to tell you is probably the most important thing if you want to keep your job. If anyone ever refers to another human being as and I went through the list of things or anything of the like, I don't care how long you've been here, you will not have a job. Our job is to judge conduct, not to judge people. That's for a higher authority to make that decision as far as I see it. So when you do that, what you do is dehumanize an individual. And when you dehumanize an individual, you're not looking at the other pillars of justice. Punishment and deterrence are one thing, but so is mercy and compassion.
And fairness.
And fairness. And that was point two. If you ever get hit with a credible discovery violation that a court finds that you willfully withheld something from the defense, you clearly will not have a job. It's not a don't do that again, because that all goes to the fundamental fairness as well. So I think that when I was an assistant prosecutor, I saw things. When I became a defense attorney, I was very dissatisfied with a lot of prosecutors and how they were going about doing what they were doing. And that helped inform me when I became the boss, the head prosecutor, about the tenor of the office. And I got to say, most people said, wow, within a month, the entire culture of the office changed. To this point, 90% of the people we can help. We can make them better people. 10% you got to put away for as long as humanly possible. There's no question about that. And I'm using rough numbers here. You know.
No, I would say to you that anyone in the criminal justice field is that so much of why people are in the system have to do with mental health, addiction, poverty. I'm going to say racism. I'm going to say, bias, all of those things. I've spoken to many judges who have said, and they might have said 15%, those individuals that are violent, that are violent and hurting people, that we need to protect the community. Those individuals, maybe they do need to be in custody. But most people in the system are truly struggling. They are, I always just say there's so much more than what they're charged with and what they're in the criminal justice system. And
but listen, I just want to say one thing. Here's where the governors are getting it wrong, and the law and public safety committees they put together, and they always ask, like, what are the 5 important criminal justice things we can do to make first, here's number 1, appoint people to prosecutors' jobs that know what they're doing and have experience. Well, let's start with that. You do number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 will follow. They still won't do it because, let's face it, to them, it's about giving payback to people, which is unfortunate. Good government is less important than payback to people. But if you have a good prosecutor that temperamentally sets the tone and gives their assistant prosecutors, and like my prosecutor did, like mine did, that our job is to do justice. And I would say to people, I don't really know what that means, but I know it's a goal. I know it's a North Star. So if you feel uncomfortable and you feel like somebody deserves a break, I'm telling you, I want to know about it. That's the biggest power you have. Once that safety valve was allowed to come out, the genie came out of the bottle, people were allowed to come to me and say, hey, boss, they did it, but here's the reasons, and here's the rehab, and here's the mental health issues, and here's the addiction, and here's what they're doing. I think they're deserving of a break. So long as we can justify it so that our other defense lawyers won't say, well, how come you gave him a break and you didn't give me a break? Then if we believe that mitigating factors are there, then we can do a just result by giving somebody. One of the best stories I have, I won't bore you with it, was not putting someone in. I put murderers in jail or still in jail.
So I want to hear the story, but I do have a follow-up question. Share the story, because when you say it's one of the best stories, I know that it's going to be a real, difficult case, good results, right?
Well, it was difficult because it's an everyday, ordinary case, and it's easy when you have 100 files as an assistant prosecutor or 55, how many files you got, to not pay attention and to treat everyone the same. And the Eli Whitney gin of criminal case dispositions happens, and that's where people get ground up and beaten up and destroyed, right? We've got to pay attention. So I had a case when I was the head prosecutor. My assistant prosecutors had a case, but I had a lot of community affairs outreach. I had the first community affairs unit in the state of New Jersey. Everybody laughed at it. They called it the Lollipop Club, blah, blah, blah. But I was out in the community, and I told these people, and in this particular case, a pastor, if you ever have somebody from your community that you either want employed or somebody is charged that you feel is deserving of a break, I want to know about it. And so this pastor was calling in about a guy who had, and I'm making things up, but probably not too far off the mark, like 40 previous arrests, 20 something convictions. He had been down to state prison on at least 3 occasions. He failed out of rehab many, many years ago. He's a middle-aged guy. And he was being kind of like talked about it being gangish kind of, but he wasn't being charged with that, but it was a drug-related offense. And this pastor kept calling me about he's in a rehab program, and he kept saying a Christian rehab program because I guess he knew that, I was a faith-based person, and that didn't make a difference to me. He's in a rehab, whatever. It doesn't make a difference. And I said, well, pastor, of all the people you got to call, I mean, this guy is not a person that I'm going to be, I cannot pass the straight face test by giving this guy a break. He's going in. And he would see me out and he would say, Bob, I want you to think about, let's say his name is Joe. And I'm like, Pastor, I love you. It's not going to happen for Joe. And then I'd be like, he'd call up or he'd text, Bob, what do you think about Joe? I'm like, what is it? This is like, guy's crazy, this pastor. So literally the guy pleads guilty, and literally on the sentencing day, I would go to church and pray on Fridays, which is sentencing day. And I would always say, Lord, please, did we do it right? Are we balancing things correctly? Have I been guiding the office correctly? Please give me a sign if there's, that kind of thing. And he called and he's like, I know you just got out of church and I know that you're praying for wisdom and the Holy Spirit. And here I am, give Joe a break. So I said, no, got off the phone and I called one of my captains and I said to him, do you know Joe? And he's like, yeah, I know Joe. He goes, he's a regular guy. He's got, problems and this, that, the other. I said, is there any like gang related activity, any issues? Oh, no, he's a good guy. He's a drug user. He's not
a user. He's a struggling user,
Yeah. But even so, most prosecutor women. So I don't know. Long and short of it was I call up my executive assistant prosecutor and I say, get Joe, the pastor who was going to be there to speak at his sentencing, his lawyer, Joe's lawyer, and the assistant prosecutor handling the case in my conference room. I'll be there in about 10 minutes. And I get there and there's Joe. And it's the first time I get an opportunity to see Joe. Why? I only knew about Joe's record. I only knew about Joe's CCH, his criminal history. I only know about what third parties are telling me about Joe. But like as an EMT, which maybe we'll get to in a little later, you first thing you do is a general impression when you're seeing something. And a general impression is a guy that's really down and out. This is not a violent person. He had a suit jacket on. It was tattered and he was scared and he was nervous. He was in an environment of a bunch of lawyers. And I asked his attorney, so you're down here. You got the head guy, the prosecutor's attention. Why should I give him a break as opposed to everyone else who's done less that doesn't get that break? And the defense lawyer says to me, I have no answer for you. That's what his lawyer said. And in my head, I sat there and said, this man deserves better from a lawyer than that.
Even if I didn't think I had anything, I would say, I don't know if I could convince you, but I would like you to talk to Joe. That's what I would like you to do. And if at the end of the meeting, you let me say a few more words, we'll talk then. Because Joe is a person.
He threw Joe in the toilet bowl, right? But it impacted me because now I started to feel bad for Joe. Okay. So I went to the pastor and I said, and pastor starts doing his thing. And so I said to the lawyer, do you mind if I speak to your client, to your point? And now, and I said, let me ask you a question. You've been down the state prison 3 times. Why should I give you a break? And how am I going to explain that to all the other defendants? And he said, you won't be able to explain it. And you shouldn't give me a break. He goes, I came down here because I was asked to, and I don't mean to be arrogant, but I've done what I've done and I've deserved everything because I did it to myself. But I'm not the same man I am today that I was when I went into this program. And he was fiddling with something under the desk. And I said, well, why are you not the same man? And he said, because I found God. Now, Melissa, as well as I do, we hear this a lot. And by the way, many people, when they're down and out, do find God, and that's great. I don't mean to, but some people use it as an excuse, and some people really mean it. So understanding that is important, because to me, it shows whether you're able to be rehabilitatable or, where your mindset's at. And he said, in this program, I learned the Bible and I have so many scriptures that are relevant. And I said, what's that under the desk? And he said, it's my Bible. And he pulls the Bible out. Now, I'm wondering whether this is a prop or not. He opens it up and there's underlining and highlighting. And I said, so who underlined and highlighted all this? And he said, I did, sir. Very respectful. And I said, well, and I pushed the Bible back to him and I said, why don't you pick out a passage that means something to you to convince me as to why it is that you think that you should get this, or that you should get this break that your pastor is asking for, not your lawyer, your pastor. And he said, well, do you want me to read it or recite it? I said, why don't you recite it? And he starts reciting biblical passages. And he starts Old Testament, which I found to be extremely impressive for Christians, the New Testament. And he said, I don't care whether I'm in state prison or not. I'm changed. I'm saved. I'm clean. I will get out eventually, and you'll never see me again. Long and short of this long story was, there's so much more to the texture of it. I said, well, I got to tell you what, Joe, I'm going to be in the Joe business now. You have impressed me to the point where I'm going to allow the prosecutors to argue for straight probation, continued rehab. I want you to write me a letter every month telling me how you're doing, and please don't make a fool of me in front of the community. And he, in fact, did write me that letter every month. But the more important part was when we left, and it's hard to show you the impact of the story. One of the prosecutors who was in the room and is a career prosecutor came to my office and cried and said, this was the most powerful moment I've ever had as a prosecutor, the power of mercy.
So it's funny because I'm thinking of, as you're telling the story, and before you were telling the story, you talked about being qualified for that leadership role as the head prosecutor. And I think one of the things you brought to that role is your experience as a defense attorney. How can you have mercy or look at a Joe like you did if you've never talked to a defendant, never did defense work? For me, and this is, I'm going to say very generally, this is always what I think is missing when I talk to prosecutors, that they see my clients as a file and as a conviction or a win. I always try to make sure that whoever I'm representing and advocating for, that whoever is handling the case is seeing my client as a person.
Yes.
And I think that if you have only prosecuted, it is really hard. I've had prosecutors, on cases where I have been successful on filing motions to suppress, and, or litigating cases say to me, well, if your client just stops committing robberies, then blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, you don't even know if it's my client or not, like, because of all the errors that occurred in this case. Just very, a lot of the same thing of like looking at the record of all their contacts, and, I have clients that have 10-year gaps or 15-year gaps, and they're saying, look at the record. And I'm saying, what changed? They were law abiding. They had a record. They were law abiding for 10 years or 15 years, and we're here again. What changed? Let's have the conversations, So I guess my question is, I know that you being a defense attorney as a prosecutor brought in a different viewpoint. How do you bring that to a prosecutor's office if the prosecutor themselves have never had criminal defense work or really have never talked to a defendant?
Well, I want to start out by saying that I believe that 99.9% of the prosecutors genuinely are looking to do the right thing.
You mean all prosecutors, line prosecutors?
Line prosecutors.
Yes.
I believe the problem is an ethos and a culture, and honestly, laziness, and a lack of curiosity, and not understanding the awesome power in now. Do you get every now and again a one-off who gets off on the power and likes to see people hurt? I remember working with when I was an assistant prosecutor, a fellow assistant prosecutor used to say Fridays was his best day, sentencing day. Because no matter how bad his life was going, he knew he was going to make somebody else's life worse. That's a person who should have been terminated from their position. That is not the kind of person that is going to properly, you brought up two things. The first is, are you properly evaluating the facts of the case? And the more, here's something that you'll find interesting. When I left being an assistant prosecutor in 1996, we had no computers. I was trying murder cases with blood evidence that we couldn't get analyzed for DNA. Okay. We had no phones. We had no computers. Now, fast forward to being appointed as the prosecutor. We have DNA, as easy as pie if you want it. We've got cell phones. We got computers, electronic data. We have all these tools that we didn't have before. And yet the investigations got worse. Mm-hmm. The common sense got worse. The ability to work through problematic issues got worse. And more mistakes were being made. So the first thing is, look, I was there as an assistant prosecutor where I've had files where I felt a person was completely guilty based on the evidence in the file, but I was willing to listen. And that's what I think you're suggesting here. The most frustrating thing to me in the world as a defense lawyer. And by the way, I don't want to sound arrogant when I say this, but I've gone through, like you have, but I've gone through the hoops here. I'm a second generation attorney. I was an assistant prosecutor in the homicide squad. I was a certified criminal trial lawyer, criminal defense experience, civil rights experience, appointed by the governor to run a prosecutor's office of 44 law enforcement agencies. I expect that if I say I got something I need to tell you, that I'm going to be listened to. I have literally written 5 times in my entire career as a defense lawyer to a prosecutor and said, please hear me out. And never once have they offered me the opportunity to come in to speak to them. Now, on the other hand, when I was the county prosecutor, of all the people that wanted to come talk to me that were defense lawyers, let me tell you how many were denied entrance through my door. Zero. Because at a minimum, I got to see how my office was handling cases. The manner and the cadence of that. Now, another issue is that a lot of the offices have disparate treatment. Every assistant prosecutor is offering different offers for the same kind of case. Mm-hmm. And they called me daddy, a big brother, what was the other one? The micromanager, they use these terms because when I said we have to have consistent parity in plea offers, and when I gave a file out, a dummy file, the same file to 5 prosecutors, we got plea offers, it was an armed robbery case, ranging from 15 years, 10 years, 5 years, probation 364, and PTI.
I don't know how you got the probation 364. Was it downgraded to a theft from a person?
They all had a different point of view about how that case should be handled based on the person's CCH, based on the evidence in the case. And when I presented that to them in their mouths, you could literally see it. I said, now you understand why daddy, or whatever it is you're calling me, is now putting in plea bargaining protocols so that at least there's parity or consistency around. So I think that the bottom line here is if I were the attorney general, this is where I think all of it starts. The governor, the attorney general, each individual county prosecutors, there's some really good ones, some that are really invested, some that are really hands-on, some that set the right culture. And there's others that are absentee landlords. They're never there. Their office is just running amok and they don't care. It's the AG's responsibility to make sure that there's more consistency here. And I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah. So let me ask you, because as prosecutor and also as a partner of a law firm, you are mentoring young lawyers. You mentored young lawyers probably through most of your career once you left being the young lawyer yourself. If someone wanted to pursue criminal law, what qualities do you think they should focus on in developing early in their careers? What would you say to a young attorney?
Oh, well, look, I'm such an odd dude. The first thing is I'll answer that in terms of what was attractive to me. So the first page of the resume, as I like to say it, or the first half of the resume, I virtually could care less about, honestly. I wanted to see what it is you do when you're not doing what it is that you're looking for as a job. I want to know, do you have anything besides academic credentials? Have you volunteered? Have you ever been in pressure-related environments? Have you ever done something just for the altruism of doing something for the benefit of another human being? And if I saw that in a person, 90% of my interview was going to be focused at that. Why? I know you went through law school. I know you passed the bar. You wouldn't be talking to me at that point if all those prerequisites weren't there. I know there were some in my office that would look at it and they'd be like, oh, they went to Harvard or they went to, I could care less. In fact, whatever. I prefer, I prefer the person who's got gritty street experience, grew up in the real world, knows people, is kind, is strong, is willing to fight the fight, and is honorable. If I could ferret those characteristics out, so for those young lawyers, that to me was attractive. I work with a bunch of EMTs right now, emergency medical technicians, and I tell them, don't ever not put that on your resume. Don't ever not put that on your LinkedIn profile. That says more about you than what school you went to.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, I have, I always come back to the fact that I have young adultish children. And so 3 that are college grads, 1 that's going to be a junior. So we've gone over their resumes and what they're looking for. And there are weird things that I tell them that they should keep on their resume, even though they might not necessarily think at first glance that they're important. One is some of the volunteer work. My kids have done a lot of volunteer work with a camp for foster kids that they've been counselors for. One of my kids has done ballroom dancing, and yeah, and it's just such a unique skill set
Absolutely.
that I say, like, this has to stay on your resume. This is more important than your GPA, and you graduated magna cum laude, which all your siblings have. But unique things like that. One of my kids played ultimate frisbee for a club at their college, and he's a computer science gaming app kid. And I said, the fact that you're playing ultimate frisbee in a club league is, different than all the kids that are sitting at their computers and just gaming all day long,
I listen, let's go to that young thing, because like I see this with our young EMTs, and I wish I had, here it is. I love them. But this is what you see a lot when we're not riding on a call. I was in the squad room the other day. Again, this is not a critique. It's not a criticism. It's just a point of view. And they're texting each other in the room. And what they're not, I went out and started throwing a ball against the wall. And they were laughing at me. Like, is that how they used to play in Ultimate? I said, yeah. I tell you what, I got outside, I took a ball, and I threw it against the wall. The point that you're raising here with the ballroom dancing, and I love that. I need to know, as a lawyer, as a trial lawyer, especially, are you a people person? When you're in front of a jury, when people say, I've been very successful in front of juries, as a prosecutor and as a defense lawyer, if you ask me why that is, I'm not going to tell you it's because I'm smart, because that's not true. And I'm not going to tell you it's because, I mean, it is true I've got a lot of experience, but there was a time I didn't have a lot of experience and was winning cases. It's because I believed in every single time I was in front of that jury. I believed in what I was, quote unquote, selling. And I had life's experiences that taught me how to relate to people, to read people. You can't do that when you're constantly looking at a phone, but you can do that if you learn some ballroom dancing.
Yeah. What's funny is I just was at the jail today talking to a client of mine, that we had a little bit of a miscommunication, which I was surprised about. And I said, I think one of my superpowers is being able to read a room, able to read a jury, being able to read a prosecutor, the judge. And I said, and so I said, I thought I was reading the way we were communicating together just fine. And then he didn't come down to talk with me like a week ago. And I was told he didn't want to. And he was like, no, they never told me. So it was like a miscommunication. And I said, it's so funny because I'm really good at reading the room. And I thought the way we were handling and communicating was great. But you can't read a room if you're not looking at the room, if you're looking at your phone, if you're not interacting, if you're not having those communications. So yeah, really important for young attorneys to understand that, and understand that this is a tool. It's a tool, but it's not the end all. It's only beneficial to a point. So let's talk about your firm. And it seems, well, I believe that there's a commitment that both you and Dave Bruno have to mental health. And you talked about being an EMT. So let's switch gears and talk about how it's sort of interesting, because I see the connection in law between mental health, even your connection with EMT and working with people in that capacity. Could you share a little bit about why you are involved in that presently and kind of your commitment to mental health and wellness as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about my dad, who said every day you can make somebody's life better or breathe easier, lots of terms like that. But then I have to talk about my mom. And my mother had a death experience at the age of 18. It's a very, very dramatic story. She had one of the out-of-body experiences that she never really spoke about that much, because she said back in her day, if you ever said something like this, people would think that you were insane. But in any event, my mother was pronounced dead and given her last rites, and became alive, obviously. Was told she never have children, and had 2 children. I'm half the proof of that. And became was a very spiritually empathic human being. And I don't mean religious. She was religious, but she was spiritual. And she had a lot of wisdom and a lot of life's experience, which I say, and here's where my EMT comes in, death is such a part of life that if you are not seeing it, you'll never live well unless you understand death as best as you can. My mother understood that because she was on the other side. So she had a lot of very simple and wise ways about her. Now, I was very sick as a child, so my mom taught me how to read and write. I was out of school constantly, in the hospital constantly, going back and forth. So I was at my mom's hip more than most. And so I learned a couple things. I learned how to cook. I learned how to, I mean, she taught me, she always said to me, I don't think any woman's going to cook for you like I do your father. So my mom told me how to cook. She was funny, my mother. She knew so much. She planted seeds. And I'm talking about seeds that didn't blossom until they were watered by grief, misery, sadness, and adversarial things. Watered by them later in my life, in my 40s and 50s. And then out came this beautiful, product planted by my mom. And so
that's beautiful, Bob.
Thank you. Yeah, she died in 2005. My mom, she died very young, probably as a result of the injuries and wounds she had sustained when she was in that accident. But anyway, my mother so I have this, from a professional standpoint, my father talking to me about helping people. I've got my mother's wisdom and spirituality about what life and the meaning of life is about. And so I was like, wow, when I get out of being, that of course drove me when I was prosecutor. I think the biggest sense of regret leaving the job was losing the community affairs unit. I know it sounds odd, but it empowered me. It inspired me. It allowed me to make a difference in the lives of people, not just putting people in jail and all that kind of plea bargaining. That's good. Don't get me wrong, but it was the platform that it gave me that I really loved. And we worked so hard on mental health and addiction. And we started the mental health court in Morris County, and we really worked on the addiction piece. So my whole, if you know my mom now and you know my dad now, it wouldn't surprise you how much rehabilitative programs we were putting together and going out into the community. I just felt it was just amazing. And then it's gone. And that was part of the dark period. And I, not about the job being gone. It's so funny how people perceive things. Oh, he doesn't want the power. He misses the power. But the power is nothing. The power is meaningless. It's the power to do good things for people that's hard. And so I can tell you just a little anecdotal story real quick. I'm out to dinner with a couple of very high level political people in the state of New Jersey. And it's right around the time I had a very difficult exit from the prosecutor's office because of politics. I'll leave it at that. Okay. I had a hard time getting in, and I had a hard time going out. And it was so, whatever. It was what it was, but it was needed. It was watering me. And while I was out dinner, we all walked outside, and this very, very high level guy that anyone, if I said his name, would know who it was, turned to me and said, Bob, what's next in your plan? Now, if you look at my Sirens and Summations newsletter on LinkedIn, I literally write an article on this. That question, what's next in your plan, would haunt me for years. Why? I had no other plan. I was on March 15th, 1968, the plan was set in motion. And in 2007, the plan came to its fruition. And in 2013, the plan ended.
Yeah.
And there was nothing beyond the plan. And so I remember going through this period, like I didn't want to go back to just having a law practice like I had it before. I wanted to do something that was different, that was new, that I'd be passionate about. As you can see, I'm a passionate person. I didn't want to just have a job. I want to do something unique. And so here's what I talked to you before about the blessings of people. And I had a number of people, including Dave Bruno. And Dave and myself were close for many reasons. It's a whole story in and of itself. When I left,
Dave shared some of how you connected prior to the prosecutor's office on a case. And I said, oh my goodness, I didn't know that. For those who don't know, because I don't think Dave Bruno's episode has launched, I talked to Dave already, who is Bob's partner. And now I'm talking to Bob, and they're going to be back to back Mighty Merp episodes. So there will be a whole circle of life moment that we're going to have.
Yeah. So you'll hear the Dave piece, how we met. Then I became Dave's boss. And then we left, started the Bianchi Law Group. Then he became my boss. But when we started, I had some rules of the road for Dave. And one of them was I did not want to be a rat in a wheel, just handling case after case after case. I wanted to be able to continue the community affairs outreach that we did in the prosecutor's office, although no one ever did that in their firms the way we were, and I didn't know what it really looked like. So it was something that we had to kind of create. And I want to do something where we don't lose the mental health and addiction work that we were doing as prosecutors. And that ultimately led to us, for example, creating an inspirational blog on our website, which people literally were like, you can't do that. And I'm like, what do you mean? We're writing about things that inspire people. Well, you're an attorney. I'm like, am I violating an ethics rule or a court rule or a statute or something?
As a former chair of the ethics committee, I'm confidently saying, no, you're good.
I mean, people were literally talking like it was like a violation of some rule, but it was, well, we never saw that before. Well, that is going to get you nowhere. Then there was, during that period of growth where times are rough, and I say to all your audience that's out there, understand that it's a watering period, like I said. And I knew that, as hard as it was, and had to go through it. So I went to Barnes & Noble, and I said to myself, I'm going to dedicate my entire afternoon to finding that one book that's going to help me out in this particular situation. And after spending an afternoon there, I couldn't find anything. I was leaving Barnes & Noble very disappointed. Like I was going to find a book that was going to make it all okay. And I hear somebody say, Bobby. And I turned around, and it was a baby, and it wasn't saying Bobby, it was saying Daddy. But I thought they were saying Bobby. And there was a father, and I see the father, and I look at the father, and he's standing by a bookshelf, or like, when you walk in and they have like promos of books and things that I had not seen. And it was Dr. Brene Brown's Gifts of Imperfection. And I'm like,
I love that. I love it.
And I'm like, oh my God, that's the book I was meant to see. So I got that book, and surprisingly to me, Dr. Brene Brown's work centers around, if you could have your camera shoot there, which you can't, the Man in the Arena poem.
I have that quote in my conference room. I have the Man in the Arena quote in the conference room, and then I have Brene Brown's follow-up quote next to it, and they're both framed. So I'm gonna take a picture of it and send it to my producer. But you know the follow-up quote, right?
I know it, I'm sure. She usually uses that exact quote, at least in the book that
She uses the Teddy Roosevelt quote, which is the Man in the Arena. And I mean, you should read the quote. I mean,
I'm sure I'm a certified facilitator for Brene Brown. So, I mean, wow. I've got a million of her quotes.
So, well, I meant the Teddy Roosevelt quote. Is that the quote that's up there at your office? The Man in the Arena, which says what? Read the Teddy Roosevelt quote. It's a long one.
By the way, just to let you know, it's ironically, before Brene Brown, I had this hung throughout the prosecutor's office as well. Because funny. I found that the greatest fear that my lawyers had was they were afraid to try cases as opposed to getting into the arena. The Man in the Arena. It is not the critic who counts, nor the man who points to how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at worst, if he fails, at least fails by daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Teddy Roosevelt, April 23rd, 1910.
Right. I'm looking for the Brene Brown response to that. It's in the Daring Greatly book. And she has a response which kind of builds on it.
I'm going to get in trouble now because I'm certified by her and I don't know which one you're referring to. But I just wanted to say that, so when we got out there, we got trained, Dave and myself, by Dr. Brene Brown. We went to San Antonio, Texas for a week, and we got trained in her Daring Way program. And every client of ours gets The Gifts of Imperfection as a book. Now, here is the point of the story. The point is, am I proud of what we set up at the Bianchi Law Group and how we operate and our team of former prosecutors and the policies, procedures, the things we do, the results we get? Yeah, that's great. But to have at least 5 people in the last couple of years say that giving them that book saved them from killing themselves, that's a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like part of, I think, the most successful people is finding what truly motivates them. And even building a law firm, I think there's something about being authentic to having yourself and your mission and what really inspires you.
But this is why I think being a lawyer, you talked about young lawyers before. Here's the point. We're not on, when I gave my TEDx talk, it was on deathbed confessions. I want to go back to that point that I said to you before. Until you know death, you can't know how to live in the present moment. Now, of course, I don't want anybody to go through what my mother went through, and I don't want anybody to die. But when I was 17 years old as an EMT, and I watched how the fragility of life, where you could be here today in a car accident and gone, whether you're 18 or 25 or, or catastrophic injury or burned to death or all these bad things that can happen. I don't mean to be morbid, but the fact is it's reality. Or like most likely you'll be on the other end of the age spectrum and you won't have your vitality any longer. You won't have your ability to make a difference any longer. And there were 2 types of people that we used to transport all the time that were older. There was one type, and they represent the minority, that was very positive about life. You loved being around them. They had a life force and energy about them, despite their sickness, despite their illness. When you got the call, because you would know people by their addresses, you would know when you would get the calls, like, okay, that's Mary Shaw. Mary Shaw was I loved her. She was so like, Bob, how you doing? What's going on? Even though her life was sickly and constantly at the hospital. Then you have the other group of people. And this is the one I want all of us to concentrate on. The ones who say, my life was meaningless. Just had one the other day. I failed everybody. Repeatedly, over. I failed everybody. I failed everybody. How you doing? I failed everybody. I didn't do it because people told me I couldn't do it. I didn't do it because I was afraid. I didn't, And I remember saying to myself at 17 years old, I am never, to the extent I can help it, going to be on my deathbed saying, I wish I had done something. So when I tried a case as the prosecutor, as the head prosecutor, for example, like I don't know when the last prosecutor tried a case was in New Jersey. Dave and myself, tried a murder case of a priest killed in Chatham, New Jersey. Everyone told me not to do it because, most prosecutors in Jersey don't try cases. Oh, it's politically difficult. It's this, it's that, it's the other. And I'm like, look, I've been telling people what to do here for years. I'm going to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to expose myself like I've been telling them. I'm going to get in that arena like the Teddy Roosevelt quote says. And moreover, and more importantly, I am not going to be a 70, 80, 90-year-old man saying, God, I wish I tried that case, and now there's nothing I can do about it.
And here's the follow-up quote from Brene Brown. She said, "For me, if you're not in the arena getting your ass kicked, I'm not interested in your feedback."
Sounds
That
like
was
Renee.
the what? It's a much longer quote, but that's really, the people that are telling you not to do something.
There's every reason in the world not to do something hard. When I got recertified as an EMT, you have no idea of the number of people. First of all, I'm not running around telling everyone what I'm doing. I just decided I wanted to go back in the game and do something. Why? I'm getting older. I got a great law practice. We're doing big things in the practice. We're doing a lot of community affairs. We're taking care of people's mental health. Reclaim something. That was the word I was using. I want to reclaim something I lost along the way because my career got in the way. And it took me a couple of months. And the next thing I know, you may see it over my shoulder or not. Probably not. The shot's too. Is my EMT patch. I find it in a box. And I'm like, I love being an EMT. I was really good at it. A lot of pressure. You got to perform. There's no safe spaces when somebody's bleeding out. There's no kitty boo-boo when somebody needs CPR. I love its purity in that it's just gritty and it's real and it's there and you have to act. And in the end, you're doing something really big. So I went back to school in my 60s. I was the oldest kid in class. It was... Everybody's like,
well, wasn't it fun being back in class? I know that sounds silly, but
it was. I'll tell you what, it was. I had an instructor who was extremely difficult and a little, whatever. It was an exercise in humility. I wasn't Bob Bianchi, the former prosecutor, Bob Bianchi, the certified criminal trial attorney, Bob Bianchi, who owned the law firm. I was just as equal to the 16-year-olds that were in the class taking it for the first time. But that reminded me of, but afterwards, people were saying, well, why at your age would you do this? Do you know how happy I am, how proud I am, how much of a difference I make in the lives of everyone I meet? Now I do it differently. It's not just about meeting you and taking care of your medical situation. You're going to be okay. It's going to be fine. And they look at you with their eyes like, thank you for, same thing as a lawyer. It's giving us the opportunities to be around people who trust us, doing big things. It doesn't have to just be legal. It can be bigger than legal.
Right. And you're probably in so many ways being an EMT now versus being 17 with the wisdom and probably the patience when you're interacting with people that you can give them so much more now. And I say that because I just think that when people are going through crisis now, whatever it is, I know when I work with people that are stressed, that I can manage their stress levels or help them manage it because of the knowledge I have, not just about the law, but sort of the insight of somewhat of this too will pass and we'll be able to get through it. And I'll be able to help navigate you through this, at 26 as a new public defender in Philadelphia, I don't know if I always had that wisdom.
You may have the wisdom, you may not have the wisdom, but you also don't have the life's experiences where a 26-year-old public defender in Philly isn't going to tell a 52-year-old person about life, right? But a guy like me now, a 26-year-old prosecutor too, right? Same thing. But a guy like me now with a punchier stomach and less hair in my head, has in a couple of wrinkles, people will listen to you more. Plus you have the ability to, like, I used to put so much pressure. I'm proud of the pressure I put on myself in a certain sense because it forced me to do certain things. But now, like when I'm on a call, my mind is so much calmer. When I'm in trial, my mind is so much calmer because I understand, you just said it, this too shall pass. Whatever aggravation you have, whatever energy you have, whatever it all is, lean into it, enjoy it, love it. Stop being so worried about it.
So I'm going to just shift gears one more time because I want to talk about your law firm. You have an amazing criminal defense law firm, I believe, of all prosecutors.
Yep.
I would say, as a former public defender in Philly, I would say hiring public defenders are just as good as hiring prosecutors. I know you love having a full former prosecutor office, but I also love the fact that your law firm not only is in the courtroom on the ground floor level, but you're doing a lot of discussions of news stories. You're having your own, it is a podcast. You have your own podcast.
Yeah.
You're really on the forefront of a lot of different issues. So when you opened up your law firm, did you know that where you are today with the podcast, with the social media, with your involvement in the community, all of that was going to occur as you opened up your law firm? Or was there growing pains and kind of figuring out the right path? Because
Yeah.
the hanging up the shingle is a big deal for lawyers a lot of times. And maybe it wasn't as hard for you, like leaving the prosecutor's office and doing it, but
It
like
was really hard.
it was, I've said this a lot of times on the podcast. I begrudgingly opened up my own law firm. I was a partner with somebody who was becoming a judge, and we couldn't agree about the law firm. And we found out in November of one year that he was going to be a judge, and we couldn't agree. My dad passed away a month later in December. And like on January 5th, maybe a week after my dad passed away, I looked at my former partner and I said, I'm just going to open up my own law firm. And it was because I had no other choice. It was the best thing that happened to me. I'm so happy I did it. I love having my own law firm for lots of reasons, but I did it begrudgingly, and I did it a little bit. I was very scared. I was at that point, I was getting divorced. I had 4 kids. I felt like a lot of pressure, and it was really hard. And everyone I talk to who hangs up that shingle expresses that fear. And so I don't know if you had it or not, but it is, a lot of stress. So your law firm is, it's a pretty, I'm going to say, for a criminal defense firm, it's a big firm. I know it's not that big, but it is a big
No, it's not
firm
a
for
lot of lawyers,
criminal.
yeah.
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 So is that what you envisioned? Was hanging up the shingle hard? Where you are now, is that where you thought you would be in, it's what, 10 years?
So let me start with, you never really realize how many friends you have until you become the prosecutor. Then everyone is your friend. There are people coming at you. You're like a mini rock star. I would literally be introduced to somebody and, hi, this is Bob Bianchi, and the person would have, he's the prosecutor in Morris County. Oh, sir. All of a sudden I became important. Now I recognize what that was. I saw it for what it was, and it actually humored me. But let me tell you, when that switch gets turned off and they say the phone doesn't ring and you are yesterday's news, I mean, it's because of my mom and the humility of my mother. And again, knowing that here comes the season of watering. Be prepared for it. It's not if, it's just when. It's having those concepts in my mind. Dave can show you a photo. Now, if you have Dave on the show, you're going to be on the show. We got to get you the photo of what we call the hovel, Hovel, the hovel. I went from having this magnificent office with diplomas all over the accolades of importance and how incredible I was, to the hovel. And what a precipitous fall it was. It was a room that had no HVAC. It had, probably illegal, to be honest with you. It had like this little jail-like window in it. It was filled with dust and dirt. A homeless person was living in the room next to us. His clothes were in the room. But it was the only space that somebody said, it had no phone line in it. It had nothing. I had no LLC. I had no money coming in because, again, my leaving the job was politically difficult. And so it just ended, and they did what they did to make it as painful as possible for me. So I had no income coming in. I already took a massive pay cut for years to be the county prosecutor. And now I've got no income coming in. And that's where you learn about shopping in the middle aisles. That's when you start worrying about I never worried about money in my life, but I did then. I didn't. So, and like I said, having Dave, who came shortly afterwards, and starting by getting your LLC. No, I had no idea. I knew the question was asked to me by that big shot person, what's next in the plan? And that's why it became daunting. I didn't know. I knew what I didn't want to do, but I knew I wanted to continue with mental health. I knew I wanted to continue with addiction. I knew I wanted to continue with community affairs, and I wanted to take my experiences and to be able to train and teach and help other people. And along the way, I think the best way that I can answer this is that since my North Star was in those directions, it gives me the opportunity to know when to take an opportunity. For example, when the media calls and says, would you be willing to do a TV interview? I never thought about that. When I was the prosecutor, I gave all these interviews to all these media people. Let me reach out to them. Then all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, Bob, we'd love to have you on. Now I'm doing Fox News. Now I'm on CNN. Now I'm on MSNBC. Now I'm being asked to do documentaries, flown out to LA to do TV shows and Court TV and Law and Crime Network and anchoring. Now that blossoms. Then, so one thing after that, the mental health space, the TEDx talk, these are all things that I love doing. The EMT work, all this stuff about improving my life and the lives of other people, so that at the end of my life, I could say my life had meaning and made a difference. No, did I know what it was going to look like exactly? I know I didn't, nor do I want to, nor do I want to know what it's going to look like tomorrow either. I'm looking forward to dealing with whatever is going to come my way. And if it's sadness, sorrow, misery, difficulty, or whatever, I just know it's another period of watering.
I'm going to end you right there because I don't think it gets better than that. I will say that during my journey as a business owner and now a podcast host is that I've learned to focus on what is important to me and my values. And that when people are trying to open doors or try to suggest other avenues, and some of it might be to expand my law firm in directions that I haven't thought of. A lot of times it comes back to, does it align with my values? Does it align with the brand that I've created and what we try to put out there as a law firm? And if it doesn't align, then I'm not going to move in that direction. So, but it took me a little time to figure out what all of that was before I can say, these are things I'll support, or these are different ways that my law firm can grow versus deciding not to grow. People have tried to have me kind of go out of the criminal law field sometimes, trying to encourage that. And I really don't want to. And part of it is because I'm certified and this is where I'm an expert. But a lot of the different areas that people suggest don't really align with what I'm trying to accomplish, not just professionally, but in making a difference in the community.
Well, I just want to say one last thing, to that point, and on business. I was courted by a lot of very large law firms with some really big number, propositions and abilities to be partner and, whatever. And I remember saying to my wife, I could see it so vividly, saying, I just know I'll be a slave. And how valuable is my freedom? How valuable is my time? How valuable is my ability to do things the way I want them rather than somebody who's paying me that paycheck? Because that paycheck's not going to come for free. There's going to be a cost at the end. And so sometimes if you know where you said your values align, that's why to me it's like, nah, let's start a practice no matter how difficult it's going to be, because at least if I fail, right, or not, Teddy Roosevelt, at least I did so daringly.
Right. I agree. Thank you so much. I know we could talk for another hour. You've sent and have given me so much time. I greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure. To me, being the prosecutor is the best job in the world. Great autonomy, constitutional officer, and you can become a judge easily after that. The reason I turned judgeships down, personally, is because I don't know. I think they treat these judges like they're children. The administrative officer of the court. Now I'm not saying anymore. Maybe I'll change or whatever, but the pressure on them and being in this bubble and the numbers, the fighting over the numbers, I don't know. It takes, I have a great respect for them. I think it's a very demanding job. I don't think they get enough credit, and I think they're not treated well enough.
Right. Well, there's not a lot of autonomy, and they're very pressured by the numbers. Numbers to the point of that they forget that attorneys have lives. This is the back and forth that the wellness committee is having about.
Don't get me started. This is what I say to Dave. He's on the wellness committee. I love it. I'm so happy for him. But I'm like, again, like I told you at one point, hire a prosecutor with good credentials and everything else will follow. Don't talk to me about wellness when you have judges pounding people for numbers dispositions. Don't care if your expert's not available. Move on. Next thing. This case. I got a situation now where I'm like, I don't understand. I've seen cases that are 1,000 days old. Why is this case 6 months old and all of a sudden you need to go to trial? It's a non-jail case. That's how this person wants it to roll.
We're trying to recognize that if you don't take those numbers off And if asking for a request or a continuance, you're getting pushback because of how old the case is. I always tell the story. My mom lived with me for 2 years. She was in the hospital for like a week. And you never know when someone's getting discharged, when they're in the hospital that long. So my mom was in the hospital. I found out on a Tuesday morning that she was being discharged, and I had court at like 1:00. I had municipal court, which is a traffic ticket. I know it was a DUI, but it's still a traffic ticket. No injuries. And I sent an email. I sent a formal letter to the court saying, and I was detailed about it, that said, I'm the primary caregiver. Well, my staff wrote it. Miss Rosenblum's the primary caregiver of her mom who lives with her and is being discharged from the hospital today. She's unable to make it to court. We're respectfully requesting a continuance. And we sent the email, and it immediately came back as a no. Now, why that level of stress on a ticket? Why is there a lack of just humanity on
But this
it,
is why
And
I laugh at this whole wellness committee thing. I'm like, I hope it changes. I hope that the new direction of the court changes it. But I said, you got one side of the Supreme Court on one side of the hallway saying, dispositions, don't adjourn, move cases, we don't have enough judges, blah, blah, blah. And on the other end of the court, talking about the wellness committee, 90% of the problem with the wellness of attorneys is because of the pressure they're under from the courts that are doing things like that. That is so insidious and hateful that it not only causes you to have a bad situation, make it worse, it makes you angry on top of it.
Yeah, I went to court and the judge said, he was talking to me and I was I was as polite as could be without being rude, but very short, just very short. And he said, do we have a problem today? And I said, yeah, we do, Your Honor. And I said, I submitted a request for a postponement because my mom was getting out of the hospital and you denied it. You denied it when I'm the caregiver. And he said, I didn't get it.
I didn't know about it. Yeah.
I didn't know about it. And I said, it's your court. So,
exactly. Same old.
But I am going to cautiously say, I'm going to say I am cautiously optimistic that our new administrator of the courts is committed to mental health and is committed to recognizing that there needs to be, I'm going to call them speed bumps or ways to slow things down, that when people are dealing with emergencies or pressures that need to move court dates, that this hard line on the numbers, we can't keep up with it. Lawyers can't keep up on trying to appease those resolutions of the case. And the truth is the court can't either. The judges can't.
That's the joke.
They can't try all the trials that need to be tried. They just can't.
So let's pass another mandatory sentencing, forcing people to go to trial. Let's browbeat the defense to take the plea because you have the temerity to challenge the government's proofs. That's what it comes out. They can't even have enough judges to handle all the cases they got. So all the weight falls. You know what? It used to fall on the prosecutors. It used to be, why can't you lower the offer? Why can't we get rid of this case? But now we got to keep the offers the way they are and beat up the defense lawyers. That's how I see it.
Well, I'm going to say that the mandatory minimums really, though, aren't the judges or the prosecutors or the defense attorney's fault. I think that it's really easy for somebody in our legislature, whether they're an assembly person or a senator, to enact tough on crime bills that they have no understanding how it implicates what happens in a courtroom.
Yeah, but the reason I mention it is because, let's be honest, when I came in, there were 2 mandatory sentences, 1,000-foot and Graves. Every case now, you got to worry about your client going to jail with 85% and near this, that, or the other. How many dispositions have occurred merely because of the penalty of what happens if you're convicted? So they've already accomplished that.
Right.
So.
Right. I always use the strangulation offense, the aggravated assault strangulation. 5 years ago, when it was a 3rd degree, it was never charged. Now that it's a 2nd degree, it's charged in every case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every case. So, all right.
All right, Merp.
We'll talk soon.
Mighty Merp is available on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite apps and players. But the best way to experience the show is to visit mightymerp.com, where you can subscribe, rate, or submit a voice message to the show. That's mightymerp.com.